Hi all, there's a very topical game recently in the Tata Steel. Magnus Carlsen blunders horrifically, it seems, and let's see what happens in this game after that, in case you don't know. So e4 against Gawain Jones. This is in round 8 of the Tata Steel, and we get a Sicilian defence. So Magnus playing white against Gawain Jones's Sicilian dragon, in fact. So bishop e3, bishop g7, and this is a standard setup against the dragon. d5, this has all been seen before. One of the main moves is e takes d5 here. For example, this has been seen a lot, this position. And here though, we have an alternative after d5, which is queen e1. This is a major alternative. And you can see that this rook is aligned with that queen there. So it's quite dangerous for black. e5, knight takes c6, b takes, e takes d5, knight takes d5. Bishop c4, making use of that pin against the queen. Bishop e6. We have king b1 now. Rook e8. Now knight e4. Now black plays the forcing move f5, and we see knight g5, and the bishop, which is attacked here, it actually drops back. And now a really curious move from Magnus Carlsen. So the world champion, to move in this position, he's got a nice pin on that knight, and this knight looks quite aggressive. Can you guess what Magnus played in this position? You might not have seen this game before. So if I give you 5 seconds, what would you play in this position? Okay, well Magnus played g4, and there's actually a tactical downside to this. g4, it looks like a nice idea to either wrench open the g file or weaken the e4 square for the knight to return back. So it's a bit of a dreamy idea if we have the knight returning back. For example, if on g takes, bishop takes, knight e4, it's a positional idea or an attacking idea for the g file, but black plays, if I give you 5 seconds, black to play here. Okay, a shocker, f4. It's actually attacking the bishop, and also this knight is attacked with the queen. The interruption of the defense of the knight is evidence. So Magnus is actually lost a piece here, basically. If the bishop goes back, yeah, queen takes in this position looks to be winning material. Say rook takes, we can play bishop e6 with black, and it's like winning material. It's not very good for white there. But Magnus chose a different way of playing this. So which piece to lose here? h4, he lost the bishop on e3 instead, because actually he could take the queen here because of that pinned knight. So it's a pawn, and okay, aside from being a piece down, white has gained now control of the e4 square and has isolated this pawn as well, and there is a potential attack still with h5. Black played h6. This is actually to show the dangers of this. In fact, say a5, white is already okay after queen b3. This is a dangerous position with the pressure on d5 here and the king there and the knight there. This is already, for example, getting back as very good for white, this sort of disaster scenario. So black's got to be really careful with that knight on g5. Just want to show that. So it's quite wise to immediately kick it, even though black's piece down. Black has to tread carefully. Queen c5 in response, not moving the knight and attacking the pawn. Now perhaps black could take on g5, but bishop b7 was played. H takes g, queen takes. This is scary with that pinned piece, but if that piece is given, this position should be quite nice for black. For example, like this, most of the problems are solved. Black's doing very well. Black played bishop b7 as an alternative. Knight e4, and here it's getting a bit scary with the prospect of queen d6 again, because after knight takes d6 hitting b7, there might be rook d5 after. Black actually guarded against queen d6, it seems, with this move, And now Magnus played h5, which tries to intensify the grip on the light squares. And maybe Gawain Jones thought this move, he didn't like it for some reason, but it does lock down any opening of the files. I think he was keen to get the queens off with Queen B6, but it seems that maybe G5 was the way to go, the safest way to go. This does seem like a very attractive idea, Queen B6. Not just from the point of view of getting the queens off, but the queen's also targeting B2 as well, potentially. But in this position now, Magnus actually welcomes the queens coming off because he's going to shred open some lines here. And black didn't take on C5. This is too dangerous to take on C5, I believe. If black took on C5, he played H takes G. Let's say queen takes, we can see that knight takes hits the rook and bishop. And this position is horrible for black. Yeah, it's a tactical disaster. So black's got to be really careful. So actually H takes G, but now things are not that easy actually. Some lines have been opened against the king, even though white's a piece down. After Queen A3, there are some issues black is facing here. This fixture of the pinned pieces as well on this diagonal is pretty unpleasant. Rook B8. Now there might be the possibility of the bishop switching with bishop F8. B3 gives the queen some escape routes here. And not minding knight C3 checks. There's always that pinned rook after. We have queen going back to D8. And now there is a weakness of the last move, that this pawn is neglected. And funny enough, this pawn is taken. It is of significance to take this pawn because it actually connects potentially resources along here, and maybe even H7 in the future. This rook could be happy to help with the queen there for H7. G takes, rook takes. Now, you know, rook takes G5 looks like another pin. Black doesn't want to be in too many pins where this one's pinned, that one's pinned, and this one's pinned to that one. We have rook G6. But guess what Magnus plays in this position? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, rook takes G5. Yeah, the queen is exerting an influence over B8, and that's emphasized with this move. Rook takes, knight takes. So yeah, if queen takes, then there's queen takes B8. Black played queen C8, but just to show that this is very losing. Everything's dropping off, basically. It's very bad. So yeah, it's tricky. So we have queen C8, but now rook G1, and the threats just continue now. Rook A8, queen B6, making use of that pin knight. Rook A6. So you might think bishop takes A6 is interesting. It would mean that this knight is free to come to C3 check, C3 with check later. That was avoided actually. Bishop takes A6. We have, in fact, queen C5, keeping that nasty pin on the knight. Queen D7. Now this knight comes threatening now knight F6 check. You see that knight F6 check will be forking king and queen there. King sidesteps that. Queen F2 now, and the attack carries on here. The king is bare without any pawns around it. Queen E7, and it's here that that was addressing perhaps queen H4, but now this rook's taken off, so it's gaining a bit of material back. Check. And now queen H6. There are nasty threats in this position, including queen takes C6, for example. We have queen A7 hitting the rook on G1, but Magnus plays a check, and now after king F8, yeah, this is getting really dangerous. Rook G5, taking the rook out of view of the queen, and also with the view of rook F5 check now. Knight E3 defending against rook F5 immediately, but queen D6 check, and now knight C5 with a very nasty idea. It's another actual blocking the queen protecting the knight here, so an interruption of that queen and the knight. And in fact, this is celebrated here after bishop c8 with, can you guess, white play here. If I give you 5 seconds. Okay, rook takes g7 check, scoops up more material. Black didn't play on here. After king takes, queen takes, and then queen takes e3. Yeah, white's just 3 pawns up. It's a very curious game, and I was keen to check it out myself because a lot of people have been mentioning it on different sites, how, because at this level it's thought that if you're a piece down at this level it's impossible to get back in the game, but I think it was just 1 or 2 slip-ups, not keeping the position closed around the king, that keenness to exchange off queens. Maybe that's echoed in even like lower level club games. Sometimes we're material up and we're too keen to simplify. And I remember reading an article by British Grandmaster Spillman that he often has resourceful opportunities when people are too quick to try and simplify things, and maybe this is a great example of that, being too quick to try and simplify the queens off, coming off, but the king safety was kind of exposed a lot, and yeah, the a7, the queen on a7 was quite influential actually, it seemed, after as well, combined with the king safety issues. Okay, I hope you got something from that. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.